Well, there's still a few more tests to run on the 2D version, but there's no need to include those tests in the videos. They should be just obvious testing, debugging issues. So I'm going to go ahead and start working on the 3D one, 3D testing. So to start with, I'm over here in where Python is installed on the computer. In an earlier video, we used pip to install Panda3D, which is another a 3D engine that works with Python scripting, either Python or C++ scripting. It's a fairly powerful one. It was developed by Disney. I don't know the entire background, but I'm sure from the site where it's downloaded, it has the whole background and everything. So under Python, where the Python's installed, we go in Library, and to Site Packages, where pip puts everything, and there's a couple folders. So this direct, we'll come back to that. Down here's somewhere is Panda3D. Should be, there it is. So there's several looks like 4 different folders for Panda3D, a bunch of modules and libraries. There's some examples in there to use and get started with. Copy from examples. And also, this folder here called Direct is part of Panda3D. If we go in here, a lot of our Panda3D stuff is the physics, the particles. So a whole lot of the actual modules we'll use, all the Python modules are in this folder called Direct. So we'll need that. That's where a lot of the stuff is. So I'm going to come over to the basic control unit, Panda3D test. I've set up a space to get started. And like normal, I'd rather work in just a regular text editor and run it from the command prompt or PowerShell or whichever one is currently open on my machine instead of working in idle directly. So I'm going to open a new file to get started, and to get a window started, we'll import something from that direct folder, in particular from direct. Inside of that folder, there's a folder called showbase, and inside of that is actually a showbase object. So we're going to import that show. The direct folder has a folder called showbase, and that showbase folder has another folder called showbase, and inside of that is an object called showbase. So that's the main one we'll need. And actually, at this point, we can go ahead and run that. We have that object, so we just do showbase constructor, then .run. If we save this, documents, basic control unit, Panda3D test, test 1, which I already have PowerShell pulled to the right directory, so I'll just run that script. We just created Python test1.py. Uh-oh. Is that not what I called it? Oh, it's not a py file. So file, save as. That should have been test1 Python script. There we go. Now give that another try. And you can see that is enough to open up our 3D window. So the showbase object has a .run method that we can just open up the window, but we're probably going to want to do a lot of stuff with that. Actually, we're obviously going to want to. So what we really want to do is, instead of calling that directly, we want to make a child of that class. So I'm going to create a new class. I'll just call it game, and it's going to inherit from showbase. And well, at this point, we're not ready to make a bunch of changes. We just need to access it. So in our initialization method, obviously we'll need the self. Not making any changes yet. So all we're going to do is call the super method. We'll call the constructor on the showbase method and run its init method. And now we can create an instance of this. I'll just call it screen to match what I did in the other test. So that's going to be a game. That's going to be a new one of our game objects here, and then we can call that same method from here. since it obviously inherits everything from the show base. So come over here, run that again, and this should do exactly the same thing. Yep, open up our little Panda3D game area. And looks like this one has a nice default size. I'll use that for testing. And again, I'm going to do I think I'm going to start another playlist on YouTube somewhere doing tutorials of 2D and 3D game development in Python. So that's coming up. But real quick, let's look and see what all this showbase class object has for us to work with. Which obviously means checking the API. And I know there's lots of examples out there. Make sure you're looking at explanations, not at examples. That way you understand what to do and can build on it and don't just have to look for another example to copy from. So I'll look for showbase in Panda3D. So make sure you look for explanations and the actual API. Just searching that goes right to the API, so we can see what's there and then check examples later if we need them. So there's the import statement, we saw that, built-in variables, and here's some of the stuff it has. So set a bunch of stuff, the init method. You can look through here. I was just going to point out a few things. For one, the camera stuff is there, so I already have the camera built in, ready to go. We also have a 2D camera, so this Panda3D will also work for 2D games. Some configuration, the shut down gracefully at the end stuff. So some of our particles and physics are going to be included already. Some mouse functionality, music and audio stuff. So you can see a whole lot of what we'll need is already built in. The axes, it's a 3D game, so we'll be able to get to our X, Y, and Z axis quite easily. And a whole lot of stuff about this. Graphics engine's ready to go. So you can see a whole lot of what we need is already included in this object we started working with, which just inherits from the main class in Panda3D. So now let's add some stuff in here to get going with this.